They blockaded a human evacuation fleet. No one survived the response. Part 1: The Exodus. The planet was dying, and everyone knew it. New had been home to 12 million people for over 300 years. Families had built lives there. Children had grown up under its purple skies. Old people had planted gardens and watched them bloom through countless seasons. It was a good world, a peaceful world, and now it was tearing itself apart. A rogue comet had struck the planet's moon 6 months ago. The impact had sent massive chunks of rock crashing into Nu's surface, but the real damage was invisible. The gravitational shock had destabilized the planet's core. Deep beneath the ground, pressure was building. Earthquakes shook the cities every day now. Volcanoes that had been silent for millions of years were waking up. Scientists said the planet had maybe 3 months left before it cracked open like an egg. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of her ship, and watched the evacuation through the main display screen. 42 transport vessels hung in orbit around Nu, their hulls marked with bright orange stripes that meant they were civilian ships. Each one was packed with refugees, families with small children, hospital patients still connected to medical machines, old couples who had lived their whole lives on this world and were now leaving everything behind. Was 54 years old. She had served in the human fleet for 30 years. She had seen battles and emergencies and disasters of every kind, but she had never seen anything like this. The sheer scale of it made her chest tight with worry. "Admiral, the last shuttle is docking with Transport 7, said Lieutenant from the communications station. He was a young man with a calm voice and was grateful for his steadiness. "How many total?" she asked. 11,800,000 civilians across all vessels, ma'am. Nodded slowly. They had saved almost everyone. The only people left on the surface were emergency workers who would evacuate on the final shuttle. It was a miracle of organization and cooperation. People had helped each other. Strangers had carried strangers' children to the evacuation points. No one had panicked. No one had rioted. They had simply worked together to survive. Now came the hard part. They had to get these people to safety. The nearest human colony was stationed 12 days away through a hyperspace corridor. The route was well-traveled and safe, or at least it had been safe until 3 hours ago. "Ma'am," said, his voice changing slightly, "forward scouts are reporting a problem." Turned to face him. "What kind of problem?" "Warships, at least 30 of them. They're positioned directly in the evacuation corridor." The bridge went silent. Every officer stopped what they were doing and looked at the admiral. The Dominion was an old empire, much older than humanity's presence in space. They controlled a large section of the galaxy and had been expanding their borders for centuries. Humans and had never been friends, but they had never been enemies either. There had been tensions, disputes over territory, angry words exchanged through diplomatic channels, but never open conflict. "Show me," said. The main screen changed to display the hyperspace corridor entrance. The ships hung there like a wall of dark metal. They were ugly vessels, covered in spikes and weapons platforms. Their design was meant to intimidate, and it worked. "They're blocking the only safe route to," said Ensign Han from the sensor station. She was barely 23, fresh out of the academy, and her voice was shaking slightly. "There's no way around them, Admiral, not with civilian ships." His mind raced through the options. The transport vessels were slow and fragile. They had no weapons, no shields worth mentioning, no ability to fight or even run. Her military escort consisted of 3 old frigates and the itself. Against 30 warships, they would last maybe 10 minutes. "Open a channel to the fleet," ordered. His fingers moved across his console. "Channel open, ma'am." Straightened her uniform and faced the screen. A moment later, a face appeared. The creature was tall and thin, with skin and 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern. Its mouth was full of small, sharp teeth. "I am Admiral Park of the United Human Federation," she said, keeping her voice calm and professional. You are blocking a designated evacuation corridor. We have 12 million civilians aboard ships behind me. There is dying. We request immediate passage." The commander made a sound that might have been laughter. "I am Archon of the Dominion. Your request is—" "Archon, these are refugees. Women, children, elderly. They pose no threat to you. They simply need to reach safety." "Your kind spreads like a plague," said. "Every world you touch, you infect with your presence. This corridor is now Dominion territory. Turn back or be destroyed." Felt her hands curl into fists at her sides, but she kept her face neutral. "There is nowhere to turn back to. New will be uninhabitable within weeks. If we stay here, 12 million people will die." "Then 12 million people will die," replied. His 4 eyes blinked slowly, showing no emotion at all. "This is not my concern." The screen went dark as the commander ended the transmission. Stood very still for a long moment. The bridge crew watched her, waiting for orders, waiting for some sign of what to do next. She could feel their fear. She shared it. She said quietly, "Send an emergency distress signal to Earth Command. Full priority, tell them everything." "Yes, ma'am, but Earth is weeks away, even if they send ships immediately." "I know," turned to face her crew. They were good people, loyal people. They had signed up to protect civilians, and now they were being asked to do the impossible. "I know help won't arrive in time, but Earth needs to know what's happening here. They need to know who did this." She walked to the center of the bridge and looked at the display showing her fleet. 42 transport ships, 12 million lives, 3 small frigates, 1 cruiser, against an enemy that wanted them dead simply for existing. "We're going to try to negotiate again," she said. "We're going to try everything we can think of. Bribes, threats, appeals to their government, anything, but I want everyone to understand something." She paused, making sure every officer was looking at her. "We cannot fight them. If they attack, we run. We scatter. We do whatever we have to do to get as many ships through as possible. Our job is not to win a battle. Our job is to save lives." Ensign Han wiped tears from her eyes and nodded. "Understood, Admiral." "Prepare a message to all transport captains. Tell them to plot emergency hyperspace jumps to any coordinates they can reach. If things go bad, they don't wait for orders. They run." "Yes, ma'am." Looked back at the screen, at the wall of warships blocking their path. She had been a soldier for 30 years. She had always believed that she would die in battle someday, fighting for something that mattered. She had made peace with that long ago. But she had never imagined she would die like this. Not running, not begging, not watching helplessly while millions of innocent people were threatened by creatures who saw them as nothing more than pests to be exterminated. She took a deep breath and made a decision. "Move the fleet forward," she ordered. "Slow approach. Keep trying to contact any authority who might listen. We're going to find a way through. One way or another, we're getting these people home." The fleet began to move. 42 ships carrying the last survivors of a dying world, crawling toward a wall of guns and hatred and death. They blockaded a human evacuation fleet. No one survived the response. Part 2: The Massacre. The first ship to die was called the Morning Star. It was the largest transport in the fleet, carrying 287,000 people in its massive hold. Families were packed into every available space. Children slept on blankets in the corridors. The ship's hospital ward had been expanded to hold patients from New's largest medical center, including an entire wing dedicated to sick children. Captain had commanded the Morning Star for 15 years. He was a gentle man who loved his ship and loved his passengers. When Admiral Park ordered the fleet to move forward, he volunteered to take the lead position. Someone had to go first. Someone had to test whether they would really fire on unarmed civilians. He got his answer at exactly 1400 hours, ship time. The first plasma torpedo hit the Morning Star's engine section. The second hit the main hull. The third, fourth, and fifth struck in rapid succession, tearing the ship apart like paper in a storm. On the bridge of the Admiral Park watched in horror as 287,000 lives ended in a flash of fire and metal. No, she whispered. The word felt meaningless. The destruction was too big for words. Escape pods were launching from the wreckage. Hundreds of them, tiny metal shells containing families who had survived the initial attack. For a moment, felt hope. Maybe some people would make it. Maybe they would let the pods go. Then the fighters came. They were small, fast ships, painted black with red markings. They swarmed around the escape pods like insects around wounded prey, and they began firing. Ensign Han was tracking the life signs on her sensor display. Each escape pod showed up as a cluster of bright dots, representing the people inside. She watched as pod after pod went dark. 50 people here, 100 there, families dying together in the cold vacuum of space. "They're shooting the escape pods," she said. Her voice sounded strange, like it belonged to someone else. "Admiral, they're killing everyone." The communication channel crackled with noise. It took a moment to realize what she was hearing. Laughter. The pilots were laughing. They were keeping score, competing to see who could destroy the most pods. Stood up from her station and stumbled backward. Lieutenant caught her before she fell. He pulled her away from the screen, away from the numbers and the death, and held her while she cried. Admiral Park's voice cut through the chaos on the bridge. "All ships, emergency scatter. Plot any hyperspace coordinates you can reach and jump immediately. Do not wait for orders. Do not try to fight. Run." The fleet tried to run, but they had planned this too well. Their warships formed a net around the evacuation corridor, cutting off escape routes in every direction. As the transport ships tried to scatter, they were picked off one by one. The Starlight Hope was the second ship to fall. Then the New Dawn. Then the Peaceful Journey, carrying over 300,000 refugees. Then the children's transport, the Little Star, which had been painted bright yellow so that the kids inside would think of sunshine instead of fear. Captain of the Little Star sent one final transmission before her ship was destroyed. Her voice was calm, almost peaceful. "Tell the children's parents we loved them. Tell them we tried." Then there was only static. Admiral Park stood in the center of her bridge and watched the massacre unfold. She gave orders, but they were useless. There was nothing her 3 frigates could do against 30 warships. When the frigate Defender tried to position itself between a transport and the attacking, it was destroyed in seconds. 3 hours. The killing lasted for 3 hours. In that time, 31 transport ships were destroyed. 9 million people died. They died in fire and vacuum and cold. They died holding their children. They died praying to gods who did not answer. They died screaming or silent or too fast to know what was happening. 11 ships managed to escape, carrying 2,400,000 survivors. They scattered in every direction, jumping to random coordinates, fleeing into the darkness of space. They did not escape. A warship targeted its engines early in the battle, crippling it but not destroying it. Admiral Park understood why. The wanted witnesses. They wanted someone to tell the story of what they had done. When the killing was finally over, Archon opened a communication channel. His face appeared on the screen, his 4 eyes showing something that might have been satisfaction. "Admiral Park," he said, "you are still alive, good. I want you to deliver a message to your people." Said nothing. She could not trust herself to speak. "Tell them what happened here," continued. "Tell them that the Dominion does not tolerate human expansion. Tell them that this corridor, and many others like it, now belong to us. Tell them that any human ship entering Dominion territory will be destroyed, just as these ships were destroyed." He paused, and his thin lips stretched into something like a smile. "Tell them we showed mercy by letting you live. Tell them to remember this mercy and to be grateful for it." The screen went dark. Admiral Park stood alone in the center of her ruined bridge. Around her, Officers were crying, or staring blankly at their screens, or trying desperately to contact the escaped ships. The smell of smoke filled the air from damaged systems. Emergency lights cast everything in a dim red glow. She thought about the Morning Star, about Captain, who had volunteered to go first, about the children in the hospital ward who had never had a chance to grow up, about the families who had survived the death of their world only to die in the cold darkness between stars. She thought about Archon, laughing while his pilots hunted escape pods for sport. She thought about Mercy. She said quietly. Her communications officer looked up at her with red, swollen eyes. "Can we still transmit?" "Yes, ma'am. Long-range communications are still functional." "Record everything. Every sensor log, every communication, every piece of data we have. Package it and send it to Earth Command. Send it to every human station and colony you can reach. Send it everywhere." "What should I say, Admiral?" Closed her eyes for a moment. When she opened them, something had changed in her expression. The grief was still there, but underneath it was something harder, something colder. "Say that the Dominion murdered 9 million human civilians today. Say that they targeted escape pods carrying children. Say that they laughed while doing it. Say that their commander called it mercy." She paused. "And say that we're coming home. We're coming home, and we're going to tell everyone what happened. And then humanity is going to decide what to do about it." Nodded slowly. "Yes, ma'am." They limped away from the killing field, leaving behind a graveyard of broken ships and frozen bodies. It would take them 3 weeks to reach the nearest human outpost, traveling on damaged engines through hostile space. Admiral Park did not speak for 7 days of that journey. She sat alone in her quarters, watching the sensor recordings over and over, memorizing every detail of the massacre. The faces of her crew, the names of the ships, the laughter of the pilots. When she finally emerged, she filed her official report. Her voice was steady. Her hands did not shake, but everyone who saw her noticed that something had changed behind her eyes. She had left something behind in that killing field, and she had brought something new back with her. Something that scared them. They blockaded a human evacuation fleet. No one survived the response. Part 3: The Response. The message reached Earth on a Tuesday morning. It came through every communication channel at once, sent by Admiral Park to ensure that nothing was lost or hidden. Within hours, every human colony, station, and outpost in the galaxy had received the same data package. Sensor logs, communication recordings, the final transmissions of dying ships, the laughter of pilots hunting escape pods. And the numbers: 9 million dead, 9 million civilians, including over 2 million children, murdered in a single afternoon. President was 63 years old. He had spent his entire career building peace. As a young man, he had studied interstellar law. As a diplomat, he had negotiated dozens of treaties with alien species. As president, he had reduced military spending and invested in education, medicine, and exploration. He believed deeply and truly that all intelligent beings shared a basic respect for innocent life. He watched the recordings alone in his office, late at night, when no one could see him cry. He watched Captain of the Little Star send her final message about the children. He watched escape pods being hunted and destroyed. He watched Archon smile and talk about mercy. When the recordings ended, he sat in silence for a long time. Then he called an emergency session of the Federation Council. The council chamber was packed. Every representative from every human colony had come, either in person or through holographic projection. They had all seen the recordings. They all knew why they were here. President walked to the center podium. His face was calm, but his eyes were empty. He looked like a man who had lost something important and would never get it back. "I have spent my life believing that all intelligent beings share a fundamental respect for innocent life," he began. His voice was quiet, but it carried to every corner of the chamber. I believed that even our enemies, even those who hated us, would never deliberately target children. I believed that there were rules, unspoken rules that everyone followed. He paused. I was wrong. The chamber was completely silent. The Dominion has shown us what they are. They murdered our children and laughed while doing it. They sent back survivors to ensure we knew it was deliberate. They called it mercy. His hands gripped the podium, and for a moment his calm mask slipped. His voice hardened. They wanted us to be afraid. They wanted us to remember this and stay quiet, stay small, stay out of their way. They believe that we are soft because we prefer peace. They believe that we are weak because we do not seek war. He looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of representatives from worlds across the galaxy. They are about to learn how wrong they are. President took a deep breath. I am invoking Article 7 of the Federation Charter, total mobilization. Every military ship, every reserve unit, every resource we have will be directed toward one purpose. The Dominion will surrender unconditionally, or it will cease to exist as a political entity. There is no third option. There will be no negotiation. There will be no compromise. A murmur ran through the chamber. Article 7 had never been invoked in the history of the Federation. It meant total war. Admiral Park will lead the campaign, continued. She watched our people die. She heard their final words. She will decide how this war is fought and how it ends. One representative stood up. His name was, and he represented a small agricultural colony on the outer rim. President, with respect, are we certain this is the right response? They are powerful. We have been at peace for so long. Perhaps there is another way. Looked at him with something like pity. Representative, do you have children? I have 3. Then imagine them on that transport ship. Imagine them in those escape pods, watching through the windows as enemy fighters approached. Imagine their last moments. Representative sat down slowly. He did not speak again. We did not start this war, President said. We did not want this war. We tried everything we could to avoid this war, but they have made it clear that peaceful coexistence is not possible. They see us as pests to be exterminated. They will continue killing our people until we stop them. He straightened his shoulders. So we will stop them, not because we want revenge, though we have every right to it, not because we hate them, though they have given us reason to hate. We will stop them because if we do not, this will happen again. Somewhere else, someday soon, another evacuation fleet will be blocked. More children will die. More families will be destroyed. His voice rose. We will make the cost of attacking human civilians so high that no one, anywhere ever, will consider doing it again. This is not vengeance. This is education, and the lesson will be learned. The council voted. It was unanimous. Within 72 hours, the largest military force in human history began assembling. Ships came from every corner of Federation space. Old veterans came out of retirement. Young people who had never considered military service lined up at recruitment centers. Factories that had been producing consumer goods switched to building weapons and warships. The fleet that gathered was terrifying in its size. Over 2,000 warships, ranging from small, fast destroyers to massive battlecruisers. 12 planet crackers, weapons so powerful they had never been used outside of testing. 300,000 soldiers, pilots, and support personnel. Admiral Park stood on the bridge of her new flagship, the Remembrance. It was the largest warship humanity had ever built, constructed in secret over 15 years as a weapon of last resort. Now it would lead the fleet to war. Her crew was composed entirely of volunteers. Many had lost family members in the massacre. Lieutenant was still at communications. Ensign Han, who had watched the life signs winking out on her sensor display, was now the ship's tactical officer. Admiral said, "We're receiving transmissions from diplomatic channels. They're requesting negotiations. They say there has been a misunderstanding." did not turn from the main display, which showed her fleet arranged in perfect formation. "Delete them." "Ma'am." They had their chance to negotiate. They chose to murder children instead. "We are done talking." Hesitated, then nodded. "Understood." Han looked at her admiral. The young woman had changed since the massacre. The tears were gone, replaced by something colder. "Admiral, what are our orders?" Finally turned to face her crew. These were the people who had survived the impossible, who had watched helplessly while millions died, who had carried that weight for weeks while humanity prepared its response. Now it was their turn. "Our orders are simple," she said. "We are going to enter space. We are going to destroy every military target we find. We are going to dismantle their empire piece by piece until they surrender completely. And we are going to do it fast before they have time to prepare, before they can hurt anyone else." She paused. "We will not target civilians. We will not murder the helpless. We will not become what they are. But we will show them no mercy on the battlefield. They will learn that attacking human civilians is the worst decision their species has ever made." The crew stood at attention. "Set course for space," Admiral Park ordered. "Maximum speed. It's time to go to work." The Remembrance turned toward enemy territory, 2,000 warships following behind her. The largest military campaign in human history had begun. And the Dominion was about to discover what happened when humanity stopped being patient. They blockaded a human evacuation fleet. No one survived the response. Part 4: The Hunt. The Dominion had ruled their region of space for 3,000 years. They had conquered dozens of species. They had never lost a war, never been invaded, never known what it felt like to be prey instead of predator. That changed in 6 weeks. The human fleet did not fight like the expected. There were no grand announcements, no formal declarations, no honorable fleet-to-fleet battles where they could use their superior numbers and experience. Instead, the humans appeared everywhere at once, striking targets across the entire Dominion before they could organize a defense. Captain Minu led a strike group of 50 fast destroyers. His target was the primary shipyard, a massive station orbiting their industrial moon where new warships were built. The defense fleet was still mobilizing when Minu's ships dropped out of hyperspace directly above the station. The humans used a technique they called ghost jumping. Their ships would make rapid micro-jumps through hyperspace, appearing in one location for seconds, firing their weapons, then disappearing and reappearing somewhere else. To the sensors, it looked like the human ships were in multiple places at once. Their targeting computers could not keep up. Their weapons fired at empty space where ships had been moments before. In 20 minutes, Captain's strike group destroyed the shipyard and 37 warships that tried to defend it. His losses were 4 destroyers. Before the command could even understand what had happened, Minu was already gone, jumping to his next target. Commander Shin did not fire a single weapon during her part of the campaign. Her mission was information warfare. Her team of specialists infiltrated the communication network, the complex web of signals that connected every planet, station, and ship in the Dominion. Once inside, they did something simple but devastating. They broadcast the footage from the massacre. Every channel, every screen, every communication device in the Dominion suddenly showed the same images. Human transport ships being torn apart, escape pods being hunted, pilots laughing and keeping score, Archon talking about mercy. And at the end, a message in the language translated perfectly. "This is what your leaders did. This is why we are coming. Your soldiers committed murder. Your government approved it. Now you understand what you have started." The effect was immediate. Civilians had been told that the blockade was a defensive action, that humans were dangerous invaders who needed to be stopped. Now they saw the truth. They saw their own pilots hunting children. They saw their own commander smiling while innocents died. Panic spread across the Dominion. People began evacuating their homes, fleeing from the border worlds toward the interior. The government ordered them to stay and fight. Most ignored the order. They had seen what their empire had done, and they knew what was coming. Human strike groups hit target after target. Military bases were destroyed. Weapons factories were reduced to rubble. The fleet tried to concentrate its forces, but every time they gathered in one location, the humans would appear somewhere else, hitting undefended targets and disappearing before reinforcements could arrive. Admiral Park coordinated the entire campaign from the Bridge of the Remembrance. She did not sleep more than 4 hours a night. She studied every engagement, every piece of intelligence, every movement of enemy forces. She knew the location of every human ship and every major installation. Lieutenant brought her reports of enemy communications. "They're falling apart, Admiral. Their commanders are arguing with each other. Some want to surrender. Some want to fight to the last ship. They can't agree on anything." "Good," said. "Keep the pressure on. Don't give them time to reorganize." Ensign Hand tracked military movements on her tactical display. She had become something of a legend in the fleet, known for her ability to predict enemy actions before they happened. Some said she had a gift for understanding how the enemy thought. She never talked about the real reason. She had spent weeks studying the massacre, analyzing every moment, understanding exactly how they made decisions. She knew them better than they knew themselves. Admiral said, "Archon is gathering the remaining fleet at there. It looks like he's preparing for a final stand." Nodded slowly. "How many ships?" "Approximately 200. It's everything they have left." 200 against 2,000. The mathematics were brutal but did not feel satisfaction. She felt tired. Tired of death, tired of destruction, tired of all of it. But it had to be done. It had to end. "Set course for the," she ordered, "all ships." The human fleet gathered for the final battle. 2,000 warships arranged themselves in perfect formation, their weapons charged, their crews ready. Opposite them, the remaining fleet hung in space around there, protecting the planet where their civilization had begun thousands of years ago. Archon opened a communication channel. His face appeared on the screen, but he looked different now. The confidence was gone. His 4 eyes were wide with something that might have been fear. "Admiral Park," he said, "we request a ceasefire. We are willing to negotiate. We will release any prisoners. We will pay reparations. We will surrender the territory you claim. Please." Looked at him for a long moment. This was the creature who had laughed about mercy while her people died. This was the commander who had ordered his pilots to hunt escape pods for sport. "You had your chance to negotiate," she said quietly. "You chose to murder children instead. It was a mistake. We understand that now. We are willing to make amends. 9 million people died because of your mistake. 2 million children. Their families are gone. Their stories are over. There is nothing you can offer that will bring them back." His voice cracked. "Then what do you want?" "Unconditional surrender. You will disband your military. You will submit to war crimes tribunals. Every officer involved in the massacre will face justice. Your government will be dissolved and your worlds will hold free elections under Federation supervision. These are not requests. These are requirements." "And if we refuse?" Admiral Park's expression did not change. "Then we will destroy your fleet, land troops on your worlds, and enforce these requirements anyway. The only difference is how many more of your people die before this ends." Stared at her through the screen. Behind him she could see his officers arguing, some wanting to fight, others begging him to surrender. "You would destroy us," he whispered. "You would end our civilization. You would still exist. Your people would still live. Your worlds would still turn. You would simply no longer have the power to murder innocent people. That is not destruction. That is justice." The communication ended. For a long moment nothing happened. The two fleets faced each other across the darkness of space, weapons ready, waiting. Then the ships began powering down their weapons. One by one, they surrendered. White lights appeared on their hulls, the universal signal of capitulation. Officers came on communication channels, requesting terms, begging for mercy. Admiral Park watched the surrender spread through the enemy fleet. In the end, only 20 ships chose to fight. They were destroyed in minutes. It was over. The battle that everyone had expected to be the bloodiest of the war turned out to be the quietest. The Dominion, rulers of 100 worlds for 3,000 years, surrendered without a final stand. Human troops landed on the 3 hours later. They found Archon hiding in an underground bunker, surrounded by guards who threw down their weapons the moment human soldiers appeared. He was brought to Admiral Park in chains. She stood before him on the bridge of the Remembrance, surrounded by her crew. The same crew who had watched helplessly while millions died. The same people who had carried that weight for months. Looked smaller now, diminished. His 4 eyes would not meet hers. "You will stand trial," told him. Her voice was calm, almost gentle. "Not for attacking us, for murdering children and calling it mercy. The galaxy will see exactly what you did and exactly who you are." He said nothing. "Take him away." Guards led the former Archon off the bridge. Admiral Park watched him go, then turned to face the main display. The hung in space before her, beautiful and fragile, its people waiting to learn what the future would hold. The war was over. Now the harder work would begin. They blockaded a human evacuation fleet. No one survived the response. Part 5: The Aftermath. The trials lasted for 3 years. 417 military officers and political leaders stood before the Galactic Justice Tribunal, charged with crimes against humanity. The proceedings were broadcast across the galaxy, watched by trillions of beings from hundreds of species. Everyone saw the evidence. Everyone heard the testimonies. Everyone learned exactly what had happened in that evacuation corridor. The survivors of the massacre were brought to testify. They spoke about the final moments of ships like the Morning Star and the Little Star. They described the sounds of pilots laughing over open channels. They talked about watching escape pods being hunted, about life signs winking out on sensor displays, about the silence that came after. Ensign Hand for 7 hours. She described her duty station during the massacre, how she had tracked the dying one by one, how she had been unable to do anything but watch and count. When the prosecutor asked her how many people she had watched die, she answered without hesitation: 8,947,212. I remember every number. The courtroom was silent. Archon was the last to be sentenced. He had refused to show remorse throughout the trial, insisting that his actions had been justified, that humans were invaders who needed to be stopped. When the judge asked if he had anything to say before sentencing, he simply said, "We should have killed more of them." He was sentenced to life imprisonment on a remote space station. His cell had one small window, facing a direction that seemed to show only empty space. But at certain times of day, when the station's orbit aligned properly, that window faced the memorial. The memorial station was built at the exact coordinates where the evacuation fleet had been destroyed. It was massive, larger than most cities, a structure of black marble and softly glowing lights that floated in the darkness between stars. The walls of the memorial were covered with names, 9 million names, etched into the stone in letters that would last for. Each name had a small light beside it, and when visitors touched a name, a holographic display would show everything that was known about that person: their face, their family, their hopes and dreams, and the life they had lived before it was taken from them. The children's section was the hardest to visit. 2 million names, many with photographs that showed smiling faces, first steps, birthday parties, school achievements. People who came to the memorial often spent hours in this section, reading names, looking at faces, crying for children they had never met. Admiral Park retired from military service the day after the trials ended. She had done what was asked of her. She had led humanity's response, won the war, brought the criminals to justice. Now she wanted to do something else. She spent the rest of her life working with refugee resettlement programs. She helped displaced peoples across the galaxy find new homes, using the organizational skills she had developed as a military commander to coordinate massive humanitarian operations. She never talked about the war unless someone asked directly. In one of her few interviews, a journalist asked her what she had learned from the experience. "We didn't win anything," said. Her hair had gone and her face showed the weight of years, but her eyes were still sharp. 9 million people are still dead. Their children never grew up. They were never born. Their stories ended in fire and vacuum. All we did was make sure it never happens again. "Some people call you a hero," the journalist said. Shook her head. "Heroes save people. I failed to save the people who mattered most. Everything that came after was just consequences, necessary consequences, but not heroic ones." Lieutenant became an ambassador. He spent decades building relationships with alien species who had watched the war with a mixture of fear and fascination. His message was always the same, delivered with the calm professionalism that had served him well on the bridge of the. "We don't want conflict," he would say. "We never did. Humanity spent centuries trying to build peaceful relationships with every species we encountered. We believe in diplomacy, in trade, in mutual benefit, but there are lines that cannot be crossed." He would pause, letting the words sink in. "If you threaten our civilians, if you target our children, if you mistake our patience for weakness, then there is nothing in this universe that will protect you from what comes next. Not distance, not numbers, not technology, not allies. We will find you, we will defeat you, and we will make sure you never threaten anyone again. This is not a threat. It is simply a fact about what humanity is." Most species listened. Some did not believe him at first. They learned. Ensign Han rose through the ranks to become Admiral Han, commander of the Federation's new rapid response fleet. This was a special force, created specifically to protect evacuation convoys and refugee ships. It was the most advanced military unit humanity had ever built, equipped with the best ships, the best weapons, and the best crews. Under Admiral Han's command, not a single refugee ship was lost. Pirate fleets learned to avoid convoys protected by her ships. Hostile species learned that threatening human evacuees was the fastest way to attract overwhelming military response. The Rapid Response Fleet became famous across the galaxy as the guardians of the innocent. Never forgot what she had seen on her sensor display all those years ago. Every night before sleep, she would review the current positions of every evacuation convoy in Federation space. Every morning, she would check for any potential threats. She carried the weight of 8 million dead, and she used it to protect the living. The memorial station became a pilgrimage site. Humans from every colony, every station, every corner of explored space came to pay their respects. They traveled for weeks or months to reach the remote coordinates, to stand in the silence of space and remember what had been lost. Many brought small items to leave at the base of the walls, toys for the children who had never played with them, photographs of families who had waited in vain for ships that never arrived, handwritten letters to loved ones who could no longer read them. Over the years, these offerings accumulated into mountains of memory, tended by caretakers who treated each item as sacred. A plaque stood at the entrance to the memorial, visible to every visitor who arrived. The words were simple, written in every human language and translated into hundreds of alien tongues. 9 million voices silenced. One species answered. Humanity remembers, humanity protects, humanity endures. The galaxy took note of what had happened. In the centuries that followed, many species tested human patience. Trade disputes arose. Border conflicts flared. Diplomatic relationships grew tense and sometimes broke down entirely. but none ever targeted a human evacuation fleet again. Some historians later called the war a turning point in galactic history. It was the moment when the other species of the galaxy truly understood what humanity was capable of when pushed too far. It was the moment when fear of human retaliation became a factor in every political calculation. Others called it a tragedy. 9 million innocent people had died, and millions more had suffered in the war that followed. The Dominion had been destroyed as a political entity, its people forced to rebuild under Federation supervision. Nothing that happened afterward could undo the horror of that first massacre. Both perspectives were correct. Admiral Park died peacefully in her sleep at the age of 94, surrounded by refugees she had helped resettle, in a small house on a colony world far from where she had grown up. Her final request was that no military honors be given at her funeral. Instead, she asked for a simple ceremony, with readings from the letters she had received over the years from people she had helped. One of those letters, read aloud at the service, was from a young woman whose grandparents had been aboard one of the 11 ships that escaped the massacre. She had grown up hearing stories about Admiral Park, about the woman who had tried to save everyone and then spent her life trying to make up for those she could not save. "You taught us what it means to be human," the letter said. "Not the war, not the victory, the part that came after when you could have rested but chose to keep working, when you could have taken credit but chose to grieve instead. You showed us that strength is not about winning battles. It is about never forgetting why we fight in the first place." Admiral Park was buried on the memorial station, in a small garden that faced the Wall of Names. Her gravestone was simple, bearing only her name and 2 dates. Beneath that a single line, "She remembered." And across the galaxy, in every corner where humans lived and worked and raised their families, they remembered too. They told their children the story of the evacuation fleet, of the massacre, of the response that followed. They taught them that humanity would always protect its own, would always answer those who threatened the innocent, would always remember those who were lost. 9 million voices, silenced but never forgotten. One species, patient but never weak. Humanity endured.